Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Future of Work podcast. My guest today is Natalie McCullough. She's a GM over at Microsoft. Natalie, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and this is actually the first time we're actually filming it. So there's going to be a video recording of the podcast and an audio recording of the podcast. And we're here at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay, where you're speaking at the New York Times. What's the official name? New York Times New
Work Summit.
New Work Summit. And so lots of really great sessions here. And we're going to talk a little bit about people analytics, workforce analytics. But before we get into that, why don't you give listeners some background information about you? How did you get involved in this? And what are you currently working on now?
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. We'll start with today. Today, I run a business at Microsoft called Workplace Analytics and MyAnalytics, which are two products we'll talk a little bit about later today. And I lead all of our commercial activities, so I work closely with customers and partners and things like that. I came to Microsoft through the acquisition of a company called VoloMetrix about 2.5 years ago, where I was the chief revenue officer there. And VoloMetrix was a startup with the very bold, audacious mission to make work suck less, and to do that by leveraging this incredibly rich data set that can be found in collaboration data, and using that to help individuals and teams and companies think differently about work. So I have a long history of working with companies to be more productive. I spent the first part of my career at McKinsey doing strategy consulting, and spent sort of the second phase of my career growing a software and services company from almost nothing to be a big publicly traded company. So I have a lot of passion for how you build cultures right from the ground up, and how you think as an organization, how you can optimize yourself.
So what's a day in the life of Natalie like today?
A day in the life? This is not a typical day in the life, I'm sorry to say.
You don't get to hang out at Suites at the Ritz-Carlton like every day?
No, not every day. But well, I think like a lot of executives, I spend a big chunk of my time actually talking to customers and partners and really understanding what's happening out in the marketplace and what are the business challenges that we can address and create value with. I spend a lot of my day with my team and my partner teams inside of Microsoft. I'm actually located in San Francisco, and as you probably know, most of Microsoft is located in Redmond. So I spend a decent amount of my day on Skype and Teams talking to people up in Redmond. But it's really a fascinating experience actually to be driving a relatively young entrepreneurial business inside of a very large, well-established company like Microsoft. So I get, in some ways, the best and the worst of both of those worlds.
And are you like a early riser, up at like 5 a.m, do the workout, and then start the day, or?
I have always wanted to be an early riser, like those books that say the most successful people only need 5 hours of sleep. I really wanted that to be me. No, I'm not a super early riser, but I have learned over the years just how important the basics are. So I do get a good night's sleep every night, which for me is at least 8 hours. I work out.
I try to do the same thing. If you can't function without sleep.
No, it's like rule number one, like must get sleep. And then most days I work out in the morning. I have a Peloton, which I absolutely love.
Oh, I see those ads for those bikes. Okay, so now you have to tell people, for people that don't know what that is, what is the Peloton?
Oh, really? So Peloton is sort of like the next generation of an indoor cycle, basically. And it's an indoor cycle, but it has a video screen in front of it, which you can either do a live class or a recorded class or a scenic view. And so I have a couple of favorite instructors that kind of get me going in the morning. And
it's a nice way to wake up, being yelled at to go on a bike.
Yeah, exactly. Get up out of the saddle. But for me, it's just a sort of critical that I get at least that half an hour, and having something home based where I can be off that Peloton and in my shower like 60 seconds later. So,
yeah, it's nice to have those. Yeah. Do you use any data or analytics on yourself? Since you're running this over at Microsoft, do you use the data on yourself at all?
I do. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to personal productivity. So I have had sort of a Fitbit or a Fitbit-like device today.
We both have smartwatches on.
Yeah. I love all that stuff, the metrics about energy and things like that. I think for directly related to what we do at work, I am also a nerd about how I structure my day and my week. And just on Friday, actually, I went through something that I do roughly, I would say probably every 2 months. I take a critical look at my calendar and how it's working for me. And I try to make adjustments and rhythm of business changes. So on Friday, I realized that I really wasn't having enough sync time of like really long extended periods of time where I could do creative work. And so I restructured my rhythm of business to be Mondays and Tuesdays, kind of get my operational meetings and my one-on-ones done, and then have Wednesdays and Fridays have these pretty massive blocks set up so that I could do deep work. And then also sort of a tickler on Friday to make sure I spent some time thinking about reconnecting with people that I wanted to stay connected with.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I made a note to ask you about some more of those things later.
Okay.
But so, Jim at Microsoft, obviously very successful role. Are there any particular habits or practices that you think have contributed to your success that you have done? Like, are there any, I don't know, rituals or mentors or books or something that you think has allowed you to kind of become such a successful leader at Microsoft?
That's a great question. Well, for me personally, I have always sort of followed what I'm interested in and where I thought I could have impact. And I haven't been one of those people who sort of charted out their career. Oh, first I'm going to do this for X number of years, and that will lead to Y, and that will lead to Z, and eventually I'll rule the world. So you didn't do that? I did not do that. I started my career as a geologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And now I'm in tech. I'm a big believer in doing things that you love and you're interested in and where you think you can have an impact on the world. And if you do a good job, good things will happen and it will kind of lead to the next set of opportunities. And that's been true for me. You asked about mentors. I think mentors are important, and I'm not the first to say sponsors are more important. I'm a big
So what's the difference between a sponsor and a mentor?
So a mentor is someone who will kind of coach you and advise you. A sponsor is someone who will create opportunity for you.
Okay.
And there's a lot written about this. And personally, for me, I believe that both mentorship and sponsorship starts with a personal spark, an interpersonal connection. And so one of the things that I think has been meaningful for me in my career is just being open to those interpersonal connections, being willing to be truly authentic. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but if you're not putting yourself out there, you're definitely not going to have a spark with somebody. And then when you have that connection, really kind of leaning into it and trying to create a deeper understanding of that other person, and natural things then follow from there.
So you mentioned that you did a lot of things that you were interested in. Mm-hmm. Would you say that being interested in something is the same thing as being passionate about it? Because we always hear this advice, like follow your passion. So I know it's not directly related to the analytics stuff, but I'm kind of curious, would you equate that as being the same thing, or are those different?
I don't think it's quite the same. I read an interesting statistic once that it was something like roughly 10% of the population has a passion, if you will, that they follow and guides their lives. I always wanted to be an early riser. I always wanted to be one of those people, but I'm not. I'm actually interested in tons of things. We're at this conference about AI, and the speakers this morning were just fascinating. I'm really interested in that and what that means for our economy. I'm also interested in climate change and
lots of passions.
Yeah, or lots of interests, I would say. Things that I think are really interesting where I could see myself having an impact. But no, I'm very jealous of the people who, wake up every day knowing that they want to be world-class, concert violinists or whatever it is. Yeah.
What's it like being a woman in technology?
How much time do you have?
I know that a lot, this is something that a lot of people, it's a huge topic. A lot of people are interested in it. So curious what your honest experiences were, and maybe if you have advice for any of the female listeners of the Future of Work podcast that are in tech, anything that you've learned along the way that you think maybe they could learn.
Okay. So, I have spent my whole career in male-dominated environments. So when I got my MBA, it was 30% women. I started my career in geology, as I said, and that's mostly men with beards, or at least it was back in the day, and now in tech. And so I don't perceive tech to be worse for women than anything else that I've ever experienced, and that doesn't mean it's not hard. So I think that tech is making progress, just like lots of other industries are making progress, sometimes not fast enough for all of us. But for me, the biggest thing has been finding a way to have a voice and be confident in my voice. And sometimes that means sort of elbowing my way into a conversation because can't see it, but I'm only 5'1". I'm a woman. It's sometimes you walk into a room full of 6 foot tall men and it's easy to get overlooked, especially if you're a quiet person. So for me, I guess one of the big success factors in tech has just been being thoughtful about how I amplify my voice and having the confidence to believe that my opinion mattered and my point of view could have an impact, could create a better outcome.
Yeah, so you got to have the confidence. I think that's important, right? If you don't have the confidence, it's very hard to do much.
It is, but confidence isn't just ego, right? Like I think confidence comes from putting in the work and being knowledgeable. And I know early in my career, like when I was at McKinsey, for example, I would always really try really hard to get the work stream that was going to build a really powerful data set. So if that was going out and doing, 30 executive interviews or analyzing a hardcore data set, I would do that because doing that hard work would then give me a set of knowledge that I could be the most expert person on and be really confident about. So I know you weren't necessarily implying that confidence is ego, but I just wanted to clarify. Like, I think confidence comes from a bunch of things. Some of it is just positive self-talk and not talking yourself out of it. But there's a very real part of it, which is sort of doing the work to become expert in something.
Yeah. So it sounds like in your case, being a woman in technology, you've always been in industries that have been male-dominated. So it doesn't feel like a different thing for you necessarily.
That's my experience. Yeah. It feels challenging, but not in any...
A challenge just like all the other challenges you had to overcome.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay, so I think that's some great background information about you and kind of your personality and your approach to things. And maybe now we can talk a little bit more about the analytics and the workforce stuff. So for some people, they may not be familiar with what we mean when we say either people analytics or workforce analytics or workplace analytics. Is there a difference?
Yeah.
So maybe from a very high level, we can start off with what is all of this analytics stuff? Workforce or people or
right.
Same thing or different?
I think there's some nuances in there. The big category, people analytics, org analytics, our product is called workplace analytics. That is all built on this very exciting thing that's happening in the space of employees, which is, I think the analog is to marketing, right? So what happened to marketing 15 years ago, and I lived through this as a CMO, is marketing went from something that was fairly gut-based, rooted in creativity and not very analytical, to something that is today almost completely data-driven, very analytical, very rigorous discipline. And I'm staying away specifically from saying HR because I think it's bigger than that. How we think about our employees is actually going through that same type of transformation, where it's moving from a world where a lot of decisions were made based on anecdote and gut to a world where we can actually more deeply understand with a data-driven approach what works for employees to get the right employees in the door, to make them super happy and excited, to put them on the best tasks, and to make them as successful and productive as we can.
Do you have an example of something that maybe used to be done by kind of gut or intuition that now you don't need that kind of gut and intuition and you actually have data behind it?
Yeah, so one of the most common things that we've done with workplace analytics is with sales organizations. And I should just pull up for one quick sec and explain with workplace analytics at Microsoft, we are leveraging this rich behavioral data set that comes off of the everyday office tools that you use. And
so whatever's on your computer, essentially.
Yeah, well, yeah. So your emails that you send, meetings that you go to, basically pulling that in a metadata format. So not the content or anything, but just kind of the rough signal, pulling that, aggregating it, de-identifying it, and using it to understand trends in an organization. Like, how effectively does marketing collaborate with sales, for example? Like, where are the networks in the organization? A lot of fantastic use cases. But we think of all of that data that's coming off of our everyday systems as a rich behavioral data set. Tells you how organizations and teams behave. And so when we marry that behavioral data set with outcome data, we can start to create a picture for what behaviors, what actions lead to good outcomes and bad outcomes. And so sales is a fantastic thing because it's a great data set to train on. What top performing sales are. They put up the numbers, so it's a really clear sense of a positive outcome. So you can marry sales outcome data with behavioral data, and you can create a picture for what do your best salespeople do differently. And it turns out they do a lot of things differently. And some of those things are very intuitive for sales leaders, and some of them are not intuitive. So, for example, most sales leaders believe that their successful salespeople should be in the field all the time. Like, they should be always out there with customers and whatnot.
That's kind of like the typical, that's what you used to see in the old movies, like get on the road, always be closing.
That's right. ABCs, always be closing. Yeah. Who's going to get the knife set, right?
Exactly.
But, and it is true in many cases, in most cases, salespeople who are the most successful are spending more time with customers. So that's fine. That proves that. But what's counterintuitive and also really interesting is that actually the biggest predictor of a salesperson's success is the strength of their internal network. So their ability to navigate the internal organization to get things done. So how do they get, discounts approved, or how do they get product expertise or senior sponsorship or whatever they need to get deals done is actually a stronger predictor of their sales outcomes than the amount of time they spend with customers. They're both predictors, but the internal network is the strongest predictor.
And you wouldn't know that unless you had the data behind it. Like, no, I can't imagine a leader at a company saying, what's going to make you a great salesperson is we need to
spend more time with marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. Figure out how to navigate inside the company. So unless you have the data for it,
that's right.
Can totally and that's probably one of many things. Do you have any other examples of how we can use people analytics or workplace analytics to make improvements?
Yeah, another one that I love is sometimes companies will marry their employee engagement score data with the behavioral data set, and that can be really fascinating in terms of discovering what do our most engaged employees and our least engaged employees, what are their lives like? It turns out the one of the biggest leader indicators of that likelihood is the manager behavior. It's like the most important thing. And this is very consistent with, Gallup reports about managers being the most important reason why people stay or leave in a company. But what we can actually see is what do managers of really engaged teams do differently with their teams. And again, just like with sales, they actually make really different decisions. So, for example, a lot of people pay lip service to doing one-on-ones. It's kind of like a manager best practice.
Yeah, you hear that all the time, actually.
Right? But when we look at the data, most companies, managers are spending somewhere like 20 to 30% of what should add up to their one-on-one time in terms of what they're actually spending. And so when we marry it with the engagement data, we can actually create a really strong case that says, regular, solid one-on-one time between your manager and an employee is the number one indicator of whether an employee will feel valued by the company, will be able to connect their work to the company's mission, and to understand kind of their role in the bigger picture. And again, that one is not one that's counterintuitive, but it's one where you can create this really compelling case with the hard data to change a behavior that everybody says they know is important, but very few people are actually doing in a rigorous way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What sorts of data are we talking about when we say like people analytics or workplace analytics? Some people might have a hard time imagining like what does that mean? Are they like looking at my Fitbit? Are they looking at keystrokes on my computer? Are there sensors on my desk? Like, what are the different options that you have for pulling in all this data to make decisions about it?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a space that's rapidly evolving. People analytics a few years ago was really focused in some fairly basic HR data sets. So what is the profile of an individual when they come into a company? What are their performance ratings? What are their job movement? What is their salary relative to market? Really important data, but I would describe that as somewhat static data, right? And where people analytics is moving and what's kind of exciting is a set of data that really unlocks what I think of as people productivity. So not just figuring out, okay, did we hire the right people, right? But now thinking about, now that we hired the right people, how do we make sure that we get them to be most productive? And that's where these behavioral data signals come in. So our vision is that there are many signals in the Office 365 graph, which are things like, are you collaborating on a document together? Are you using Skype or Teams together? There are many of those signals that will contribute to creating this picture of what effective work looks like in an organization. Today, we have started simply with email and calendar metadata. Like I said, not the content of any of that, but just the from to. And that data set alone, first of all, it's massive and complex, but that data set alone unlocks this incredible picture of what's happening in an organization that's sort of light years ahead of what people had access to before.
So what can you tell by looking at some of this data? So let's say email, for example. You see the to and the from. You look at, let's say, Open Skype or some different other applications. Some people might say, all right, so what? So you know who I'm sending an email to, you know who sent me an email, you know that I'm on Skype, like, big deal. But what can you actually, like, what does that tell you?
Right. Well, so I think first, I just want to clarify a couple things, which is it's really easy to get into like spooky Big Brother territory with this.
That was going to be something else I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Let me just head you off at the pass there. So we actually have, at VoloMetrix and now at Microsoft have invested a lot of energy into enabling people and organizations to harness this data while still respecting employee privacy. So we have a employee-led view, a product called MyAnalytics, which surfaces up interesting data, which I'll answer your question in a sec, a bunch of interesting data to you that you're the only one can see it. It's 100% an empowerment tool, like your Fitbit. You go make action from that, right?
Interesting.
Things like...
what sort of things?
So things like how much focus time do you have in a week? Uninterrupted blocks of time. Or how much after hours time are you spending? A lot of people are trying hard to manage work-life balance. So giving them a view into that can be helpful for setting goals. We also have one of the coolest things we do is provide quality indicators around your meetings. Most employees and companies spend an inordinate amount of time in meetings.
Meetings about meetings to talk about meetings.
That's right. And like there's tons of, memes on the web about how lame they are, right? And it's true, actually. Like that, many high percentage of meetings really do suck, for lack of a better word. And so we actually have some really interesting data that we show about that. So one of the things that we do is we marry the email and the meeting data, and we will show you how much time you're spending in meetings where you're aggressively multitasking.
Interesting.
So if you're sending a lot of emails during your meetings, you really should be asking yourself the question, why am I in these meetings? Do I really need to be here? Can I ask the meeting owner to restructure, either to change the meeting format or provide this information in a different way? But those numbers can be massive, somewhere between 30 and 40% of time. And I'm kind of really aggressive about that stuff. And even I see really high percentages of my time that I'm still not optimizing.
But you have to have the computer in the meeting. Like if you don't bring your computer to the meeting, then it doesn't track the...
If you're sending an email through your mobile or whatever, it will...
So as long as you're using a application or something that goes through the server at a particular company...
Yeah, this capability is all built on the cloud value of Office 365. So if you're using Office 365 email in the cloud, then all of this data is coming in, and then it can be translated into insights that are delivered back to you.
So it knows, for example, like when the meeting is by looking at your calendar.
Yep.
And so like if you're not sending out any emails and you're just quiet during that time, then so you would interpret that as you're being productive, you're listening.
It would just assume that that's a meeting that you're in that would not get flagged as a multitasking meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
We can't quite go all the way to saying it's a good meeting, but it's not an obviously bad meeting, right? We also help you have visibility into things like double booking. Double booking is something that a lot of people sort of pass off as not that important, but it's a really bad manager habit that leads employees in an organization to have lack of clarity into whether when they go to a meeting, they're going to be able to make the decisions that they need to make and be effective in that meeting.
So getting back to kind of the question around, what can you learn from somebody's email or from how they use the different applications? A lot of people might say, what can you possibly learn about my email habits? Or
right.
So what can you interpret by like the to and the from and the which applications I'm using? Is it like social network analysis where you can see like where the networks are? And
yeah. So I like to tell people that at its most superficial basis, email and calendar data will give you information about how effectively you're communicating with other people, emails and meetings, right? Just some of the examples that I showed you about the quality factors of those. But if you take it sort of a step further, and we always put that collaboration data in the context of organizational data, it's actually a window into how an organization works. So you mentioned organizational network analysis. Collaboration signals are really powerful for painting a picture of how the networks work inside of an organization. You can see where there are silos in an organization.
Like, does marketing talk to sales or R&D or?
That's right. Or even if you look at two parts of an organization, does information go up both silos and across only at the top, or does information actually sort of fluidly, organically go at every level in an organization, right? That's a healthy collaboration. So the network analysis piece of collaboration data is really powerful. I think the other thing that I find super fascinating about this is that the data sort of can reveal work culture. Right. So, for example, companies have used this data to shine a light on a culture of micromanagement or disempowerment. So let me spell that out for you for a sec. So if junior level employees are spending 80% of their meeting time in meetings where their manager is present, and the percentage of their actual communications that are proactive, not reactive, is very low, then that's actually a pretty good indicator that you have a culture of micromanagement. Versus the opposite, where you see junior employees who have the right level of coaching and mentoring. They have a nice level of leadership exposure, but they also have a high degree of proactivity in their work and independence in their work. That's a more healthy culture of empowerment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, the stuff that you can do with data now is pretty mind-boggling and pretty interesting. Why do you think it's so important today and for the future of work? Like, do you ever get any leaders or managers that you try to talk to them about data and they say, I don't need data. Like, I know, I've been at the company for 20 years. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I know what motivates my team. I know everything about everybody on my team. I don't need your data. Like, do you ever get?
God love them, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever get any like pushback like that from people that say, too much time, too much work? Like, I just know what I need to do.
To be honest, not really.
Okay.
I think leaders of companies today know that they need to use data to manage their businesses more effectively. They don't always know how to get started. So more often for us, we will have a really exciting first set of conversations where leaders are like, wow, this is amazing. I can't, what do we do here? And then the challenge is then helping them identify the place to get started. Right? Like, what is that first step that you take to get into this world of AI and data, and particularly applying data more strategically to your workforce? That's kind of the most challenging thing for executives, I think, is to figure out how to get started. But I would say most business leaders today are trying hard to embrace big data. Yeah.
And getting started is definitely something we're going to touch on as well. What about like the whole creepiness factor? You alluded to this earlier, and I know sometimes people get concerned with this, and there are even some companies out there that monitor employee keystrokes to figure out like if they're working, are they not working. We've heard stories about companies putting sensors on employees' desk to monitor how often they're there. I think there was an article recently about Amazon that wants, I don't know if they want to do this. I think they had a patent for this, for employees to wear wristbands to tell if they're actually working or not working. So is there like too much analytics, too much data? Are we going to get to a point where it's kind of like we're trying to turn humans into robots and like optimize every second of their day? And I know you're not working, like get back to work.
Right.
Like, are you worried about that at all?
I'm not worried about that particular aspect. I actually think what we're aiming to do is to take the drudgery out of work. So to take the really low impact, low productive activities that are usually not very exciting for an employee and help them get rid of those. So in many ways, I feel like it's the opposite of taking knowledge workers and making them more automated. It's about sort of freeing up knowledge workers to really do the stuff that you want them to do. On the creepiness factor, we used to do this very aggressively, and I think it's still sort of built into our product DNA, is this 2x2 matrix of actionable versus creepy. Mm-hmm. So if some data is very actionable but also very creepy, and that's a section of the matrix that we stay away from.
What would be like an example of creepy?
Well, like if I sent you an email and then I got a notification that said, Jacob didn't read your email, or Jacob spent 2 seconds on this email, that would be really actionable for me, because then I could call you up and be like, hey, dude, what's the problem? I needed you to read this email. But it's also it's kind of an invasion of privacy.
It's a little weird.
Yeah. So that would be an example of something that we would not do, because that would invade the privacy of Jacob in that scenario. But there is but then you take it sort of the next step and you say, well, what's something we could do that would be actionable but not creepy? And so just to take that example, if I send an email to a group of 5 or more people, an important email, then I can actually get some statistics about what percentage of the group read that email, how much time people spent with that email, did they forward it, did they open the attachments? That's super actionable for me, because I need to know if my communication was read or not. And it's not creepy, because it doesn't violate any one individual's privacy by revealing what their behavior was. It provides a group feedback. So I think it's incumbent on all of the companies, Microsoft included, who are pushing the boundaries in this space, to be really thoughtful about the features that we're creating that will create value for employees without violating that privacy boundary. And it's something we take really seriously. And I actually think it's one of our competitive differentiators, because I think, knock wood, we so far do it really well, and we have a good track record of being really careful about it.
And this whole area of workplace analytics and people analytics and data science, it's really starting to grow. Like there are a lot of companies that are hiring some very smart people in this space. What's your perspective on where we are in general with this? Like, are a lot of companies just very early in getting started? I know there are some companies like Google that are, and Microsoft. You guys have been doing this for years. But what's your sense of where most companies are with their people analytics journeys?
It's still really early days, I would say.
Even some companies here, I talked to them, I said, are you doing anything with people analytics or AI? And they say, nope.
No. Yeah.
We're thinking about it.
Yes. I think awareness of the possibility has gotten pretty good. I would say there's pretty growing and reasonably high awareness of that the solutions are out there, but it's still early days in terms of companies who are going into it. Like a great example, or a great kind of marker of this is Wharton has a people analytics conference that they've had now, I think maybe for 5 years, roughly. And that was kind of always the leader academically either last year or the year before, Jeffrey Polzer at Harvard Business School created a people analytics course. I was on the phone with a professor from INSEAD who has a course they call organizational analytics. So
it's becoming like actually introduced as courses now.
It's becoming a thing that we're training our future managers and leaders to think about. What are people analytics? What are the ways that they can use data to optimize their workforce? So I love that as kind of a leading indicator of this becoming something that is going to be a mainstream. It's going to be something that every big company, every innovative company will need to do. We're still in the Gartner curves or whatever. We're still definitely in the early part of that curve. So that's good and challenging in some ways. What I personally love about it is that almost every day I hear about a new use case or a new thing that somebody thought of to use this data for that created an insight or a value that wasn't thought of before.
Do you have a favorite story of...
Well, the thing I'm really excited right now is the potential for this data to shed some light on the diversity and inclusion conversation.
Oh, so how would that work?
Yeah, so if in the organizational context, a company loaded gender or age or other or minority status, other diversity factors that they wanted to track, then they could analyze what the experience of those employee groups is relative to the average or other employee groups. So one of our customers did this, was a kind of professional services firm, and they wanted to understand what very senior women, what their work style was versus the very senior men. And it turns out that the very senior women had networks that were 3 to 4 times bigger than the very senior men.
Wow.
And so I in my own head, I have like a chicken or egg question about that is, did they have to do that in order to be successful because of the challenges that they faced? Or is that something that was sort of natural and that's, part of what makes them different as leaders? But regardless, it's a really fascinating insight into how different it is for different populations inside of a workforce. And that area, we're just scratching the surface on in terms of what we can learn and how we can help companies create more equitable, more balanced, workforces that get everybody, excited to be there.
What are some other, I guess, big questions that you can answer with analytics? So it sounds like you can look at diversity and inclusion, you can look at like teams and productivity. What are some other things that you think companies can use workplace analytics for?
So I think of workplace analytics as a foundational tool to drive data-driven cultural transformation. So
you can change culture with it.
You can change culture with it. You should be changing culture with it. And yesterday at the conference here, one of the speakers was talking about Deming and the whole Six Sigma lean manufacturing revolution. And in some ways, there's a parallel here, right? Which is, if we want to change culture, we need a mechanism to measure whether behaviors actually change. Lots of people define culture different ways. I think of culture as the how. Strategy is the what, culture is the how. And historically, it's been really hard to measure the how. And if you can't measure something, you can't manage it, right? And so McKinsey's done this study several years ago that reported that 75% of organizations are in some process of transformation. 70% of those transformations fail to reach their desired outcome. And 50% of transformations fail because where the rubber hits the road in terms of changing human behavior, they miss. Humans don't change. Human behavior is the hardest thing to change. And so with behavioral data sets like workplace analytics, we can actually understand whether cultural transformation is taking root inside of an organization. So if you're trying to build a culture of inclusion or empowerment, or even say you're trying to make your culture more externally focused, you can start to measure that and say, okay, well, we did this new program XYZ to make everybody more externally focused. Did it work? And now we have the data to see where it did. And if it did, let's do more of it. And if it didn't, let's do less of it. At Microsoft, our sales ops group just recently used this to validate a sales training that they had done. They had done this fairly specific sales training for a segment of the sales population, and then they analyzed it using workplace analytics, and they found that the people who had gone through that sales training had, I think, 8 or 9% more time with customers than the people who hadn't. So some meaningful, powerful change that they were able to measure in terms of trying to drive a more externally facing culture. So at the big headline for me is that this data is about enabling cultural transformation. I think of it as having multiple dimensions. One dimension that we often talk about is freeing up capacity. So that's a lot of the stuff we started the conversation with, is like, how do I get you out of those terrible meetings, right? How do I take this process that is sort of ballooned into something that takes over the company every quarter and get it back into something that's more manageable? The second dimension is around growing mastery, and that's what we talked about with like the idea of studying what top performers do, best managers, that kind of thing, and creating that shared understanding. And then the third is sort of the holy grail, which is orchestrating networks inside of an organization, right? Like, throw away the idea that your hierarchy is going to do anything for you. Your organizational hierarchy is not how work gets done. So how do you now orchestrate the networks where work does actually get done?
So when you get these insights, like, how does the practical side of it work? So for people that, you know, are having a hard time visualizing it. So does all this data get put into like a big Excel sheet, some kind of like a dashboard, and then you crunch a bunch of numbers and you get something on there that says, that like tells you this stuff? Or like, how do you know what's going on? Do you need some data scientists that just look at a bunch of numbers and do some correlations?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Or is it something where, you know, like on my Fitbit, for example, it's very easy for me to, you know, I slept 6.5 hours last night. Right. Very easy. Like, I know what that means.
Yeah.
And I know that if I'm traveling, I sleep less. Obvious, easy, I have a dashboard.
Yeah.
But for something like diversity and inclusion, I would imagine there are all sorts of different data points that you need, and the output isn't going to be like a little chart that says, congratulations, you have 20% improvement in diversity. Like, you need somebody to interpret that, and how do you visualize it? So how does that output look like? Yeah,
so there's two modes. So the insights that you as an individual get about your time are delivered to you in a consumer grade application like anything else that you use.
So it looks like a Fitbit dashboard.
It's almost a Fitbit dashboard. It, like I just said, it will show up inside of your email and calendar experience. So it's right there. It's very much like any other consumer product that you would use. No heavy lift required, right? Serves up kind of actionable insights right where you need them. The more sophisticated, looking at the organizational behaviors in an organization, those are enabled through what we think of as sort of an analyst tool bench, if you will. So we sort of surface up a way for an analyst to go deep into any one of these insights